trapped under collapsed buildings. It was a powerful earthquake that struck the centre of Italy at about 3:30 in the morning local time. There is a search and rescue operation very much underway now to try to find people who are perhaps trapped under collapsed buildings. And of course, the damage that has been caused is now being surveyed. Let's talk about all of that with Dr. Joanna Faure Walker, who is with me. She's from the Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction at University College London. Good afternoon. We know there have been aftershocks already. Would you expect a lot more, by which I mean that hampers the rescue effort as well, of course? Yes,
so when there is an earthquake like this, we expect there to be lots of aftershocks. Typically, the aftershocks won't have a magnitude more than 5 point something for an earthquake of magnitude 6.2. The number of aftershocks will decrease each day. It does decay with time, but we do expect lots of them.
And when we look at some of the pictures that have been coming through all afternoon, there is presumably still large areas that simply can't be accessed, and therefore experts can't assess the damage. So many roads have collapsed that it's very hard to access certain areas.
It is. I mean, this is a mountainous region, and there's also a lot of small towns, some with maybe a population of up to 20. They might have one single access road on them, and because it's mountainous and there's been all this shaking, we get landslides. So it might be the case that actually landslides will block critical routes, and so it might be the rescue workers can't even get there, and if they can, there are so many settlements to get to.
And looking at these pictures, when some buildings have absolutely been brought to the ground, and yet others are, to our eye anyway, are standing perfectly well, is that because simply the modern buildings have been or should be built to a certain standard? Given that this is an area prone to earthquakes, how much do we know about how much retrofitting has gone on, that sort of thing?
So it will depend on what the building's purpose is for, because they will prioritise buildings depending on that. So after the 2009 L'Aquila earthquake, there was a big project to retrofit key buildings like schools, hospitals, and so there will be some buildings with retrofitting. But a lot of these buildings are masonry, they're made of stone, bricks, which are very susceptible to earthquake shaking, and the intensity of shaking they received, sort of 8, 9 in towns like Amatrice, these buildings just don't stand a chance. And the problem with a lot of retrofitting is, one, it's very expensive, but also on some of it, it's quite unsightly. So if you have these beautiful historical buildings, you might not want to take up those measures which are very unsightly. Not all of them, but the easier ones certainly are.
And the epicentre, as I understand it, was, relatively speaking, very shallow, and that hence also some of the damage that we're looking at here.
Yes, so it was around 10 kilometres, exact numbers will come out later. What that means is, because the earthquake initiated near the surface, so 10 kilometres is near in our world, it means a lot of energy is released, and a lot of the shaking is very close to the surface, so waves reach the surface with a large amplitude, so that means there's a big amount of shaking, lots and lots of shaking could cause buildings to come down.
I know emergency workers, in fact, I think these are live pictures, emergency workers are there at the scene, as you can tell, constructing temporary shelters. This will be home to a lot of people, potentially for a very long time now. Do people like you, I suppose, do people learn more and more each time there is an earthquake? Is there a lot that can be learnt in terms of protection for the future?
Oh yes, we are still learning so much every time there is an event, both from the scientific perspective of how do they occur, what causes them, what earthquake might trigger another earthquake, but then also from our preparedness. Are people prepared? Do they have plans? Do they know what to do? And then obviously in the post-disaster recovery, what's the best advice to give? How should we give people temporary housing? Do we build houses? Do we give them tents? How much money should be spent on the different products? It's still an ongoing debate, but we are learning every time there's an event around the world.
And you talk about post-disaster recovery. Would your concern be that there is a strong chance of another full earthquake? I'm not talking about aftershocks, but something again.
There is. I mean, we don't know is the answer whether there will be or not, but there certainly is a chance of it. I mean, in this region in 1703, for example, there were 3 earthquakes in January and February, close to each other. They had magnitudes between 6 and 6.7, and it is thought that probably the second 2 were triggered by the earlier ones. We don't know that for sure, but it seems that what happens when you have an earthquake, it can actually change the stress on neighbouring faults. So one earthquake happens, the stress on another fault is increased, and therefore an earthquake can be triggered. So there is that concern in this region. definitely.
Very, very interesting to have your expertise. Thank you very much, Dr. Joanna Faure Walker from University College London. Thank you.
A 21-year-old British woman has been stabbed to death at a backpackers' hostel in Australia. She's been named as Mia Aycliffe Chung and is believed to be from Derbyshire. Police say the suspect, who's 29 and from France, shouted Allah Akbar, meaning God is greatest, during the attack at Home Hill in Queensland. Andy Moore reports.
Friends said she was always smiling and full of life. This was Mia just a few days ago on her way to work on a farm. But it was at the backpackers' hostel where she was living that she was attacked. One 30-year-old man, another Briton, was seriously wounded. An Australian man, believed to be the hostel manager, was slightly injured. A dog was also killed during the rampage. The attacker was a 29-year-old French national. Police say they're investigating an act of individual criminal behaviour that's unrelated to race or religion, despite comments he made.